Welcome to today's episode of The Square. We're doing another installment of Architecture and Film. I'm here with James Adams, VP and Architect in the commercial sector. Thanks for being here, James.
I'm so glad to be here.
Taking time out of building high-rises and headquarters. Congratulations on your big win. We can't say what it is, but, you know.
By the time this is out.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about AI. That was our theme for today.
Yes.
And it's very, apropos. There's a lot of talk about AI, but we're looking back at movies that we're looking forward to AI.
Exactly. Artificial intelligence.
Yes.
To be clear. This is about architecture and film. We have 4 great movies.
4 movies. And we've covered a couple other movies for those of you that are constantly watching the Architecture and Film series.
Just waiting for it to come.
Yes, we've talked about Ex Machina. We've talked about a few others that had AI influences in other conversations. But the ones for this conversation are
going to be great. So we're going to start talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey first. What's interesting about these 4 movies, and I'm going to go through them all here.
Yeah.
Is how they relate to each other in time in the 20th century about making movies about AI, about the future.
We didn't pick these 4 randomly.
Yeah.
There is a reason we picked these 4.
So 2001: A Space Odyssey, filmed in the 60s, released in 68, but set in 2001.
Yep.
Then we've got Blade Runner, 1982, but set in 2019 in Los Angeles. And then we have AI, Artificial Intelligence, that was released in 2001.
And set in 2150.
150 years ahead. And then we have Her, which came out in 2013, but is only set in next year,
2025. We're almost there. Funny enough, it's becoming less sci-fi by the day with ChatGPT and different AI platforms that we have now.
And it's interesting to watch how these movies build on each other.
Yeah.
So let's start off with
2001.
2001: A Space Odyssey. This is Stanley Kubrick, 1968. It's based on a short story by
Arthur Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke, science fiction writer. He wrote a short story called The Sentinel in the 50s. Kubrick picked up on that idea to make this movie. And just kind of some first thoughts on...
But this wasn't... It was loosely based on The Sentinel because Arthur C. Clarke was writing...
Correct.
2001: Space Odyssey at the same time it was being made into a movie.
Yes. I want to... Just an early point I'll mention here. 2001 is followed by 3 sequels, 2010, 2061, and 3001. That was Arthur C. Clarke's last book. Came out maybe 2001, around that time.
Yeah.
They're actually all phenomenal follow-up sequel books to 2001. But 2001, the book and the movie do differ a little bit from what they talk about. But the first thing I want to make a point about in relation to the directors in these movies is Stanley Kubrick is known for trying to introduce a lot of ideas in every movie he makes. There's a lot of things going on. This particular one, 2001, for anyone who missed it since it came out 60 plus years ago.
Yes, almost 70 years.
Almost 70 years ago. Is really about man's relationship with the universe. I think that's actually a quote from Kubrick, if I recall correctly. And the big ideas in that, obviously AI, something we're going to talk about in that, but it's also about man's evolution and that relationship of evolution. And that's actually something that we'll cover to other movies we're going to
throughout all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly, I think the idea of evolution it's interesting how he starts it right with the apes and goes all the way through the end.
What differs us from an ape versus AI from a human?
Well, and there's something there, and it ties in with AI, with the movie AI about violence and the perception of violence, because at the very end he gets the tools and whatnot. But I'm curious, as there's a lot of movies that are based on books already written, and there can be collaboration with the authors. But with 2001, where the book was being written alongside the movie, often writers will have a visualization in their head of what their world looks like. But because Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke were collaborating so closely on both projects, I'm curious how much the architecture and set design of the actual visual movie might, and then it's speculation, but might have influenced Arthur C. Clarke's world as they were going along, and vice versa.
That's a good question. That's a really good question, actually. And one thing I think people lose sight of when they go back and watch older films, especially if they were not alive or of an adult age when these movies came out, is the appreciation for the technology that was visualized in these movies. 2001 is great about that. I mean, 2001, Stanley Kubrick spent the equivalent of like $6-7 million today's dollars to build basically a big Ferris wheel that they could film in to recreate the Centrifugal Force space station that was the Hilton in our stratosphere. And to that end, I think the efforts he went to Kubrick also was one of those directors who even picked out the fabrics.
Yeah.
For
every detail.
Every detail was his mind, and I think he drove, from what I read and what I understand, he drove a lot more of the decisions of the visuals of the story, and thus drove the story, which is probably what explains why 2001 the book differs from the movie, and also just the themes he focused on in the movie. But to bring it back to set design and really to architecture, 2001 I think is just really interesting in the way it uses so much of the iconic modernist, mid-century modern, Futura kind of things at the time period. I mean, even the fonts, like Futura is one of the fonts they use in there. I can't think of one of the other major fonts, but these are all contemporary fonts of the early 20th century that they were using to showcase and talk about this more futuristic world. In fact, there's when they go to the Hilton, you see Herman Miller desks. Yeah. You see there's these beautiful red chairs. I can't think of the designer, but you have Saarinen tables. You have all these things, all these high design of the time period, architecture and furniture. And again, we talked about the fonts.
Well, and at the time, it was in the 60s, contemporary architecture was kind of the style of the day. And in the imagined future, it was a future with sleek and kind of functional space stations, and you had the AI HAL 9000, which was a lens and a red light, basically. And so it was a big leap from the contemporary architecture of the 60s to the practicality and the functionality and efficiency of space design.
And again, we're going to talk about this in all the movies, and one of them in particular in a little while, but the use of color.
Yeah.
Another thing, too, the stark contrasts of the bright white versus the black of space.
Yeah.
A lot of the sets are bright white or backlit.
Red keeps making an appearance.
Red, you see red in spacesuits and in the chairs we mentioned already, things like that. The objects of our world, of a man's world, are very much using that color. And I think it's an interesting observation is that in architecture, a lot of contemporary architecture, when color is introduced, architects are known for wearing our black and being avoiding color. But when it is used a lot, and it's red is often the color that's bright. It's a very brilliant, sharp, violent color.
Yeah.
And it always creates a juxtaposition to a lot of our basic building materials of steel, glass, metals, things like that.
There was I had a photography professor in college that would, for the first, I think, 2 semesters of classes, you could only use black and white photography. You were not allowed to use color photography. And the idea there being, if you're composing it and you're using lines and light and shade to compose an image, and it's good, or it's composed correctly in black and white, it's only going to be better in color. Whereas a lot of times color can mask bad composition. Is there a similar idea in architecture where if you can think about it in a black and white type of mindset, obviously we don't live in a black and white world, but if at its bones the architecture is good, then when you're adding color, you're only accenting what's already good.
That's a good observation. I think you see parties put together, conceptual ideas in architecture, often to be like, well, let's put a red element here.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is yet, but there's something here. We'll start with a red box or a red circle, something like that. Speaking of red circles, back to Hal.
Yeah.
So Hal's a red dot, right? And there's a scene in the movie, when after Frank Poole, one of the 2 astronauts, along with, I forget the other guy's name, the main guy.
David.
Bowman. Dave Bowman.
Yeah.
After Poole is launched out into space, and Bowen works his way back on the space station, he goes to disable the AI of Hal.
/ murdered, but yes.
Actually, he's not murdered. He comes back in 3001. So
he's
found
really?
But anyway.
Spoiler alert.
It's a great book. It's a great book about the future of the internet before it even was a thing. So pretty cool.
Yeah.
However, when he goes to disable Hal's data center, if you will, is all just washed in red light. It's a red space.
Yeah, that's
very dramatic like that. and he's wearing a red suit in there, but I think it's washed out by the red of the room of Hal. I think it speaks to just the use of color, how red can be, again, it can be harsh violentness, which may reflect the villain that Hal is, but it also makes this connection to, again, the artifacts of humanity. Once you get into the brain of Hal, you realize he is a human construct that made Hal.
Right.
And that red light is a reference to.
And you're left with, is he an evil computer, or is he really just trying to do as best he can with his computer brain what he was programmed to do, which was save humanity in his own mindset? And it's interesting because when you're talking about red, and not to get ahead, but when we get to her, red it's kind of the other side of the coin, because red is a thread. You mentioned it to me. And once you said this, I saw it in every single shot. Yeah. But it's one of those things that it's not a violent color. It's just like this accent. It's actually a really soft, warm color. Yeah. But I get ahead. So let's talk about Blade Runner.
Right. One more thing, though. One more set I want to talk about, which the only one that's not too futuristic in 2001 is our final scene. So the end of the movie. The movie starts off with prehistoric times. Apes are abound. The monolith shows up. We don't know what the monolith is. Yeah. We learn that it's basically a higher form of intelligence from aliens, if you will, and helps serve as a catalyst to evolve ape mind to use tools. Yeah. And use the bones to fight with, and make that transition. And then we move forward through modern times of 2001 to finding the monolith on Tycho on the moon, which is early in the movie. It's a second act. Yeah. And that leads us to basically a signal we're able to read from the second monolith to go out to Jupiter, which is Saturn in the book. Right. But go to Jupiter where another monolith is observed. So we send a spaceship out there into the third act to find that monolith and see what we can find. Right. So then everything occurs that we've talked about thus far in that act of the movie before we finally get to the monolith, where Dave Bowen basically enters it in his little spacecraft. In that scene, then he basically goes through through the stars and
black hole of sorts.
Exactly, a beautiful scene too, and ends up in this room that is both sort of a neo-Victorian room, combined with a very futuristic backlit floor. And this is a scene that's been talked about a lot. In that room, the monolith is there again. Yeah. It's more of a human scale size it was with the apes. And you're in this sort of purgatory scene where Dave Bowman basically evolves. Right. So he's going to become something more. He's going to leave his body, by this mortal coil behind, and shudder it off and be this spirit.
Spirit thing, yes.
And in that scene, it's interesting to see the artifacts they take from humanity, maybe to comfort him. I'm not really sure. It's a really interesting.
Reduce the stress.
But it's a very interesting set. It's got this kind of 90s music video. To me, in my opinion,
mystique to it.
glowing floor, and then the monolith in the scene, kind of just floating in the background. But yeah. So just one last big iconic scene in that movie is everything that's filmed in that room.
And I think it's one. I mean, again, it's one of those things that it's one of the more iconic even if you've never seen 2001: Space Odyssey, if you've seen an image from the movie, this is probably one of them because it's one of the more iconic scenes. And you brought up a point earlier, which was, unlike pretty much every other film we will talk about, this film only ever had one version.
Yeah. Yes. It's a great point.
There's
Kubrick.
No other versions of this film.
Yes. We talked about this. How Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick, did not like to have alternate versions. He was definitely not someone to tinker with his movies or to save anything that was edited out. And he's known for destroying all the sets, destroying models of like the Discovery 1, the spaceship they take to Jupiter. It was
destroying
all
film
destroyed.
That was not put into the edit.
Exactly. All that film was they cut at some point. I mean, I heard he cut a lot of film, but when they did the first actual release for viewing purposes, they cut another 20 minutes out of the movie there, and that was all destroyed. Yeah. And he never wanted to see that released. Ever. So it's kind of interesting the way
he made sure it was never released.
This was the version he accepted the version it was, and he was done with it. And also he had total control, as I understand it, of that movie. He really did have the authority as the director and the real maker.
He had the clout at that point.
He could do that
to make those decisions.
And that takes us to the next movie. I know you're itching to talk about Blade Runner. Nope.
So one last thing about A Space Odyssey before we transitioned to Blade Runner. So, particularly with a lot of AI and sci-fi movies, obviously VFX is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Stanley he did a lot of in-camera effects.
Yeah, we started to talk about this earlier. I think it's great to bring that up. We talked about the Ferris wheel he built for filming. One of the interesting things I love about this that a lot of people that didn't grow up in that era, not 2001,
yeah,
1960s, is that the screens when they're flying up to the Hilton.
Yeah.
And we got that shot again. We can probably pull back up of let's see here. I think let me back up. It's this image here.
Yeah.
So he comes to the Hilton, right? And there are flat screens over there on the wall where the coffee machine are, and you see flat screens on the spaceship, the shuttle coming up there.
Yeah.
We didn't have flat screens.
Did not exist.
They projected those on. It was a projection onto a flat piece of acrylic to make it look like a flat screen. So they use a lot of technology like that. But a lot of these things were all done in camera. There were sets that were built. We didn't have a technology. And I think what's wonderful about that is that for the most part, 2001 holds up.
Yeah.
It really holds up. I mean, we didn't really have breakthroughs in the way we did special effects of any substance for another decade till Star Wars came along, right?
Yeah.
It's the mid-'70s. It's a good 7 years after this was being filmed when we had the Industrial Light and Magic come along and really, reimagine how we could make movies, which makes Star Wars pretty timeless.
I mean, the VFX side of things went from something that primarily meant models and miniatures and, sleight of hand type camera tricks to completely digital.
Yeah.
And completely composed in a digital world, not anything that was practical.
Yeah, when they're in, when the artificial gravity that they're supposed to be on here is turned off in later scenes in the movie, the stunt actors are hanging from wires.
Yeah.
And they film them from below. It adds to the effect that they're above you, but it also hides the wires.
Right.
So it's these little practical tricks they didn't have the technology later to do. Which I'll make a point, again, to bring up the sequels to this. There was another movie, 2010.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the director who made 2010, the sequel. It deviates even further from the book. But it tries to use a lot more of a technology that was available in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s to tell its story. And the special effects aren't that special.
They do not hold up.
They do not hold up.
It'd be a tough thing to follow a Stanley Kubrick film to begin with.
Yeah, indeed.
All right, so let's transition to Blade Runner. So Ridley Scott, 1982 is when it came out, and it has a really distinct kind of noir film to it, film look.
Oh yeah, it is fantastic. We've got some great imagery of this future 2019 Los Angeles that is just fantastic, and very iconic opening scene when you're seeing Los Angeles in the future and you're seeing these refineries in the background burning off and the music's kicking in, and then eventually you work your way into this metropolis of the city with these huge ads. And just to back up for a minute, Ridley Scott, who was a commercial director, was coming off the success of Alien.
Yeah.
So 1979, beautiful, beautiful, perfect film, in my opinion. Big fan. The aesthetics in that. And again, Ridley Scott was someone who has always been into every detail of the movie. Works through everything. Brings all the right people on board to build a team to make sure everything is thought through. And I think that Blade Runner is not a perfect film.
But in contrast to somebody like Stanley Kubrick, who also was very much in the details, Blade Runner has how many versions? 9 versions?
9, yeah, 9. I think there's 9 versions of Blade Runner. There's 2 maybe you don't count, but there's 7, and there's 5 that are still available for purchase if you get on, Apple or Amazon or any of your favorite film watching apps. And the last version, so the movie was released in theaters. There were 2 different versions then because basically story was hard to follow, so they did a narration where Harrison Ford talks over a lot of the movie in different scenes. And that version was around quite a while. Yeah. Stanley Kubrick was fairly much, not Stanley Kubrick, Ridley Scott was a fan of that movie. And then in 91, they did the director's cut, which actually Ridley Scott wasn't really involved with. So they cut it again in 92, and he was a little more involved in that one. And that's the version probably most people know from DVD or cassette back in the day. And then fast forward another 20 years to maybe 2012, 10, they did the final cut. The final cut is the one that, at this point in Ridley Scott's career, he is completely on top of his game. He's like Kubrick was when later when he had all that clout.
I wonder if he would burn everything else except the final cut at this point.
Right. So he got to do the version he wanted. So so I would say if you're going to watch,
if you've not seen it, go find the final cut one.
And this is critical. I'm gonna go a little spoiler here. So,
because
part of the reason why they did that final cut is because they were already making talks to move forward with the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, which came out, what, about 7 years ago?
Years ago, yeah.
Okay. So one of the main premises, again, I'm spoiling this movie, is that Deckard, who's played by Harrison Ford in both movies, is actually an android himself.
Right.
A replicant. And he plays a Blade Runner in the original. So the premise of the movie, which is introduced with a little bit of a screen crawl at the very beginning, is that it is the future. It's 2019, and mankind has developed AI and androids. They have one version called the Nexus series, and the Nexus series basically is where we finally have reached we've passed the uncanny valley, and they are completely human,
indistinguishable.
And the Nexus 6 in particular is the model. And so the thing is that they are relegated to working off-world. There are obviously problems with how mankind interacts with AI, which you've already seen how HAL goes awry in 2001.
And to a certain extent, even oh man, I'm blanking on Haley Joel Osment's character in AI, but towards the end, he kind of.
But we're building here. We're building here. It's 19. We got this movie.
We still got to get there.
We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there in kind of the what is the zeitgeist of AI at the time period, right, through film. And so when we get to this movie, AI has already been kind of sold as being a devil in the machine, something to be wary of. And so once again, now we have these Nexus 6, and we have this future it's set up for us that humans don't interact with these, and actually they've gone rogue, and so there's a elite force of police or military, paramilitary that hunt down these net replicants and kill them, or as they say in the movie, they are not killed, they are retired.
Retired, yes.
They're retired. So Harrison Ford comes into the movie, this kind of opening scene, and he plays a human who is retired, former Blade Runner, and he's brought on to hunt down 4 Nexus 6 replicants who are here on Earth, and wreaking havoc, or going to wreak havoc.
And the reason why the final cut would be the one to watch versus the others has to do with the ending and how that translates to 2049.
Yes. There are multiple theories until the final cut came out about
what happened.
So to our two of our main characters in this, again, Harrison Ford and
Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer plays our main villain, but we also have as our love interest.
The
movie is
Sean Young.
Sean Young, thank you. Sean Young is she also is in
plays Rachel.
Plays Rachel. She's also in the sequel in 2049. She's been in the original Dune. And other great sci-fi movies of the time period. So Sean Young plays a replicant as well, who it is a little bit ambiguous in the early part of the movie whether or not she is. Harrison's character Deckard has a test they use to see if you are replicant or not.
Yep.
And the newest models are better at passing the test as human. So it's a little more difficult for them to test. And that's a theme as well that Rachel brings on early on.
The whole idea of what is to be human.
Yeah. Well, she says, am I a replicant? She's not even sure if she is or not. She doesn't know. And as we know, spoiler, Deckard is also a replicant, which we never know in the movie.
Yeah.
Except in the final version that was released, there's a dream sequence. And this dream sequence is a dream that is implanted in his brain. We're basically told that through other scenes in the movie, that all of these replicants have these great memories, but they're all implanted memories.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Blade Runners can speak to those memories undermines the humanity. And I believe one of the themes there is that it creates a madness in the replicants because they are questioning their own humanity.
Yeah.
Which I think is something as humans, we're also able to go through that same experience. And I think it's making them more human-like in that effort. But so a lot to dig into that.
So back to the architecture side of it, though, you go from something like 2001, which is this kind of clean, functional futuristic design. And, obviously in the 80s, it was kind of a postmodern high-tech architecture feel. And the imagined future for what was 2019 in the film, it's way more kind of dystopian and dirty and grungy and
but very iconic,
rundown. But still, because you can still place where that future is in real world.
You could go back to Fritz Lang's Metropolis to see the kind of maybe the origins on film of the trope of the dystopian future, the dichotomy of glassy towers and a corroding core. I mean, it's in so many movies. It goes back that far. But Blade Runner was one of the ones in this era to come along and really reinvent and really bring to life on film. And I think when you're watching this scene here early in the movie, it really captures that.
Yeah.
You're seeing that refinery. You're seeing the gritty part of the city, but you're also seeing these towers. And what I love is if you actually stop and look at some of these scenes in the movie, a lot of these are all little models they've built for this. But a lot of the buildings they showcase are, they're actually like turn of the century, last century buildings mixed in with these huge ads cast on them and these big brilliant screens. I love this screen on here. I mean, we live in an era where that exists.
Well, and again, the imagined future in Blade Runner is 2019, and these kinds of screens exist now. Like we aren't to the proliferation of the flying cars yet, but there are, again, pieces of this where they weren't far off. Thankfully, it's not quite as grungy and populated as this looks like, but there's pieces of it that the imagined future has come to reality.
Well, and the short story this is based on from Philip K. Dick is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Right.
And very
Which
short
is just
short
a
story.
spectacular title regardless.
All right. It really is. And it is, this movie completely deviates from it. The term Blade Runner is not even in that short story. Replicant is, I believe. But one of the main themes in that short story is that we have ruined Earth. It's in the future, and we have used up our resources. Before terms like climate change and things like that have come along, global warming, the ideas of us using up our resources and ruining our planet are evident. And we poisoned the Earth. I think we've had multiple wars that have poisoned the Earth. And so animal life is very rare on Earth. To own an animal, most likely you own a replicant animal, not a real one. And if you have a real one, the animals they have in the short story are all kinds of random elements. And so in the movie, when Deckard goes to the Tyrell Corporation, which is who built all these droids, and they have a beautiful scene where they go to their office, which is not much different than this scene here, but it's just big glowing pyramid, covered in little greeblies all over it. It's a beautiful little office, and they go in there. Deckard meets Sean's character, Rachel, and while he's waiting for her, he sees an owl, and he's looking at this owl, and when she comes in the room and he asks, he makes a comment, is this artificial? And she says, of course it is. It's very rare to have a real animal. It's this idea we've ruined Earth. And in the book, or in the short story, a lot of it actually takes place in the moon or in space elsewhere, as I recall, and Earth is just ruined place. And you get that here. You get this idea that Earth has been pretty rotten. And again, we're going to see that in a lot of these future-thinking movies about what you see that in artificial intelligence and AI.
Well, I think universally, all of them have a relationship with nature. And some of them, like Blade Runner, it's a very contentious relationship with nature. But in some of them, like her and even AI, it's imagined to be a more harmonious relationship. He doesn't know I'm going to do this, but there's a little Easter egg here, and I'm curious as an architect if you've ever done this. So Blade Runner happens to be Francis Walker's favorite film in the world.
Oh, okay.
He's a massive fan. And often when we do projects together, particularly projects that are thinking about the future, we've done this on several projects in the Middle East and other ones, I won't name them specifically, but we will hide an owl or something into the renders. And we have these little Easter eggs that are kind of like, half Easter egg, half homage to something, and very rarely does anybody pick up on it. But if they do, they know what it is, right? Has there been anything like that for you that you've done on some projects where you've put a little Easter egg in there, a little homage to film?
Cannot confirm or deny that. but I will give you one story since you asked. So when we were doing the Luminary, which is the building that we are filming this in now, it's the expansion that we completed in 2019 with our developer partners, Crescent. we had worked with your team, Media Lab, to create a series of renderings, photorealistic renderings of the building.
Yeah.
I made one great hero shot, kind of a dusk shot of the building taken down Houston Street, just down the block, looking back at the building. And one of our esteemed young interns who went on to greener pastures for himself at some point. No, we had nothing to do with it. He had been playing with the rendering. So we used to do a lot of memes and things as we worked late on the drawings and the design. And he had photoshopped in Mr. Peanut and another
beloved cartoon character.
Yeah, into the rendering. And that rendering then stayed in the folder where the renderings were kept in the marketing drive.
No.
This rendering was then released
Oh my God.
and used by the client in something, I forget what. And or somebody caught it because it was so small in the background. It was very obvious once you saw it. And then another one more follow-up to that is we work with another firm where, without naming any names, one of our main client contact is actually a former Corgan employee.
Oh, okay.
And also an architect.
Yep.
And we had completed some imagery, some renderings, again, with the Media Lab's help for this building and one of the hero shots. He had rendered into the image. He went back and added to the rendering in Photoshop, rather, and included several different images of myself and some of the other design members of the team throughout the rendering of this office building in the background. But he also hid, if you're familiar with Disney's Grogu, the Baby Yoda.
Yeah, Baby Yoda.
He put Baby Yoda behind a tree. And I think there was a few other Easter eggs hidden in the image. And that rendering he then sent back because he also had added some actual things he wanted included, some foliage and some greenery on the decks of the building. And we used that in some presentations and some actual conventions.
Without realizing?
And some conventions. I went to some events. And we used that image. And then once that image was blown up and put on a poster and set out,
it became a lot more
obvious. And I was a little bit caught off guard by it, but the client was present at one of these events and thought it was just hilarious and loved it.
Loved it.
Gotten
that playfulness.
His Easter eggs in. But other Easter eggs, I will not confirm or deny. They may be in there.
They may or may not be out there.
So I want to hit on a few more points about Blade Runner, since we're talking about this image and the buildings in here, and some more of the architecture that was present in later scenes. So, in this image here, we are at Deckard's apartment. And there's some pivotal scenes that occur here. But one of the interesting things about this is this loft. You can see it's got kind of a concrete ceiling. It's a very.
Is it weird that this really reminded me a lot of the architecture of The Fifth Element? I mean, it's bigger, but there was like that heaviness and that utilitarian, and there was the bulkiness to it.
Yeah. You very much get that brutalist architecture.
Yeah, that brutalist.
Heavy concrete. We saw that in some of the movies we've talked about in the past, including Gattaca. But one of the neat little notes here is that the Innes House, which is one of the block homes that Frank Lloyd Wright, esteemed architect, America's architect, created in the 20s, I believe. They actually used castings of the exterior of that home in L.A., and you can see it in this image here on the left in his apartment where his shelves are. Yeah. And there's actually a lot of this type of motif, not just this literal impression that it is casting from, but throughout the movie you see these kind of forms like this. And I think they speak to this grittiness and this texture. There's really no purpose to that, but it adds a layer of something that's sort of futuristic at a time period. I mean, you got to think when that was created, there's nothing like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely a departure in this from a lot of the Beaux-Arts and early modern work into what was being done at the time. So just a very interesting set to lean on that.
Do you think, because again, that we're going from the contemporary architecture being something that was very kind of postmodern, high-tech adventure, or high-tech architecture, to something that's an imagined future and it's dystopian, but not to beat a dead horse, if you will, but the idea of the brutalist architecture, I feel like whenever there's dystopian, a lot of times there's that idea of brutalist architecture.
There is.
What's the connection there?
I think it's a minimal, clean future, this idea of stripping away all the ornamentation that gets us there. And there's something about that traditional Beaux-Arts or Victorian or something Gothic even architecture that's going to draw our eyes to a time period in the past and a much more human past and not a more machine future that we get from the brutalist architecture. And our last image I think we have from this movie, let's see if we can pull that up here. So this is the Bradbury building in Los Angeles. Both that Innes home, which only was a casting for his apartment, but that home was used in probably 80 films.
Yeah.
And the Bradbury building, same thing. So this is a building from 1870s. in L.A., and it's the last act of the movie occurs here. This is where we learned that the maker of so many of the replicants is actually lives in this empty abandoned building in the loft on the top floor, and the Rutger Hauer's character, one of the main villain of the Nexus 6, comes here as well to kind of find his origins. Why does he exist? Why this is his God he's coming to see, this little man who works here. But also this guy meets Daryl Hannah along the way. She plays one of the replicants as well. And I can't think of her name in the movie, but she's here as well. So there's a big action scene that occurs here at the end, and because of this beautiful banistered staircase that leads all the way up through the building in this atrium in the space, it's a beautiful building to film in. But it is this, again, that juxtaposition of this future and these future characters in this old world, very human, very man-made, ornamented building, and I love that transition. Again, like we saw it in 2001 with the purgatory white box room scene at the end. It's like there's something, it's going back to the humanity and that we create beautiful things as opposed to the simplicity and beauty in machines and that you might get in a brutalist architecture.
It's interesting because I was watching, it's not one of the movies that we watched for this, but I was watching iRobot, which is a lot more of a, pop film. But they have a very similar scene where, Will Smith goes into a house that's in theory going to be condemned and then it gets completely destroyed. But it's the same kind of, you have some of these real high-tech architectures, but then they're in this building that is kind of more Victorian and more ornate. It's interesting to see different movies kind of juxtapose those styles against each other.
Well, that's Isaac Asimov. That short story that came from, which again is same era of these big thinkers in the early 20th century, C. Clarke and Philip Dick, who were imagining these futures. I mean, think about these movies that were being made in this time period and how forward thinking they were. But now that think about it, this movie is actually in the past. Not just when it was filmed, but when it was set. This movie was 5 years ago, and thankfully we don't live in that world. We have not ruined our planet.
Yet.
And AI has not been a threat that we've needed an elite paramilitary group to hunt them down, stop them. But it is a good transition to our next film.
So, and we are going through these films a little bit quickly, obviously considering what masterpieces they are. But we're at the end. We want to have some time to talk about them in contrast to each other. So the next film is AI, which came out in 2001. It is thinking about the world in 2150. And
they actually thought ahead. They said, we're not going to do 20 years ahead. 30 years ahead.
Way ahead.
We're going to go a century and a half ahead. We'll give them a little more. We don't know what may happen by 2150.
Well, funny enough, speaking about, kind of this ornate idea, there is a lot of the movie is set, in fact, the opening scene is set in, you don't know it at the time, spoiler alert, it's a flooded Manhattan. You find out at the end of the movie, but it's set in kind of a more ornate wood tones, wood patterns style of architecture.
More the humanity again. We're not in this future. Also, just to start off with this movie, the fact that it came out the same year as the setting of the first movie we talked about from 1968, being filmed in the mid-60s.
It's almost like we planned that.
It's interesting.
It's almost like it was intentional.
I love that about that. I think we have some good images here. Here is that future New York that we see in the fourth act of the movie. I think several of these movies have 4 acts, which is just something about trying to tell a story this grand. And here we are trying to cover the movie or the salient points about architecture and AI. But this is imagining a future a century and a half from now.
And we'll talk about it a little bit later when we get through all these. But again, there's very much present that idea of nature and culture, that relationship between society and nature, because they start off, the very first scene is the ocean, and they've talked about how the ice caps have melted and flooded.
That's right. That is the whole opening of that. And it's interesting here. I flip forward. So now we're in the city. In the movie, and it's interesting here is that this image with the bright lights and the architecture and the glassy towers, it's got some of that Blade Runner-esqueness to it, but also has a lot of the kind of anime comics of the 90s and the neon. It's like Future City or whatever, and I think it has a lot of life and energy, which is a little more a positive note. Even though we're not seeing any real nature here, there's no trees, there's no plants, there's no everything is concrete or metal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, or just light.
In the city, yeah.
Flash. There's nothing else there. There's no tree-lined boulevards or whatever. All the cars are flying down the road, so it's still a little dystopian. And it reminded me of a comment when the district next door to us here in the West End in downtown Dallas is the Victory district, and Victory was imagined, in the '90s. First started coming to life when they built the American Airlines Center, and it opened up in '01, I believe.
Yeah.
Funny enough. And that neighborhood, as they started building out that master plan, by about 2005, I believe, is when Corgan got involved, and we worked on the House of Blues, which is taking an old dilapidated building and modernizing it. We partnered with another architecture firm and built a House of Blues there. And while doing that, some of the first wave of buildings was coming online, the new construction, the W Hotel, others around the American Airlines Center. Robert Wolanski, who was a former Dallas Morning News writer, before that worked for D Magazine and wrote a lot about architecture and the environment in our city. I think it was him who coined the phrase or described Victory as Blade Runner on a sunny day. And I always kind of stuck with me and probably a lot of people, the idea of just futuristic buildings.
Yeah.
But in changing the time of day, it does something for the mystique here of this architecture to show it at night.
Yep.
Show all these lights. And I think also that ties back to Dallas. Dallas is always trying to be a future city. Dallas has never held on to its history. Doesn't have a lot of history.
Yeah.
It's a very young city, but also it's always yearned to be this world-class future city. So our skyline is incredibly well lit.
Yeah.
We've won awards for it. In public polls and things like that about how beautiful our skyline is, just for the lighting alone. I think when the Omni Hotel came online,
And the strips on the Bank of America
Bank of
building.
America, very iconic.
Yeah.
That's been around since the '80s. The reason why RoboCop, which we're going to cover at some point here, was filmed here. It was a futuristic Detroit, not a dilapidated city. And I think that again, lending itself to a nighttime shot allows these buildings and the ones in Blade Runner to appear as so much more.
Yeah.
So you see that again here in AI.
One thing that I thought was interesting, just from a film side of things, Haley Joel Osment is in several films that he does a spectacular job in. But I was reading how with this one, and I read this after I'd watched the movie, so I went back and watched parts of it in order to portray kind of that eeriness, and I think he nails it. There's an eeriness to him that's not obvious, and you're not sure why. And one of the reasons is you never see him blink. Yeah. He intentionally would always do takes where he kept his eyes open and you never see him blink. And I was like, there's no way that's true, especially how young he was. And I went back and watched, and you never see him blink.
Wow.
It's incredible. Even for the underwater scenes, which is crazy, you never see him blink. And again, it's those detail things that add to it. There's a lot of this, again, it was set in 2000, so you've got this 2000 architecture, which was a blend of modernism and sustainable design. And it's interesting that even though that's the era in which the movie was created, it's like it was useless because you open the scene and the Earth's flooded and it didn't matter. And, you get into what is very much kind of a, I don't know, utopian vision of what it can be in the future.
Utopian and dystopian. Again, here's another shot. We see Jude Law, who plays
I love his character.
another android. He is
he's someone who brings pleasure to people. Let's leave it at that.
Great way to say that. What's a lot of these androids in different ways or different definitions of that do just that. So he has a purpose, why he's built.
It was funny you say that. I wonder, I wish I could kind of get into the brain of either Stanley or Steven Spielberg in this, because you get to the flesh fair where they are, essentially destroying these robots. But in that cage, it really there's so many different ideas for what a robot is. And there's one scene where the guy with the projected face on the tube is like, oh, I just need my light fixed and I can get back in the mines or whatever. And it's that idea that there's a broad variety of designs of robots based on the utilitarian nature of what they're intended to do.
Yeah. Speaking of mankind and Homo sapien origins, and we don't go too far into that, but we talk about it in the movie 2001.
Yeah.
About identity, about our nature as humans to form tribes, part of tribes, and how that leads to xenophobia, racism, other things like that. I kind of wonder, they never really touch on this, I think, in the movie, is because we have androids to compete with, to hate on. Is there less issues among humans to themselves?
Racism and other things. Yeah.
Are we more? I wonder. It's just that the movie doesn't go in that level of depth and that topic at the time, but it's an interesting thought. But we should also back up here too, real quick, and we didn't really preface this. So this is a movie. We said it came out in 2001. Yeah. It's a Steven Spielberg movie. He was the director, writer, and I think one of the producers. But it was based on a treatment that Stanley Kubrick, again, who did 2001, had written many years earlier. And it's an interesting story is that Kubrick was, I understand it was, even though he was an authoritative director, he was still well loved and revered in the filmmaking world by his contemporaries. And he was friends with Spielberg. Spielberg saw him as a mentor.
But he was kind of notorious for not bringing people into the inner circle.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And so as we talked about before, in this movie, for this story, he brought Spielberg in and basically said, I want to produce the movie and I want you to direct it. And I think Spielberg, I don't know what was in his mind, but I'm sure it was a bit overwhelming with thought. Ultimately, it did work out in the sense that Kubrick was busy finishing his last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, which had taken quite a while to make, which was on the heels of, gosh, I'm trying to think of that. How much earlier was Born to Kill? What's that movie called? Vietnam. Yeah. Anyway, all of his movies take a long time to get made. Even 2001 he started that in 64, I think, came out in 68. Yeah. It was a long time for these kind of movies. And anyway, he never got to make the film because he passed away. And so when Spielberg chose to move forward with that movie, it became his vision completely. Yeah. And he brought on his, the set director for this movie was Rick Carter. And Rick Carter did a lot of movies with Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, who had a Lucasfilm, and he envisioned these sets. So he had a lot of leeway from Spielberg on what to create and how to create. And they'd worked together a lot already. They'd done a lot of movies, Jurassic Park, among others. And so what's interesting about this movie is that I think architecturally is it's a little bit vapid. It's missing a lot of architecture. Yeah. They choose not to show it. They hint at it. There's a ethereal nature to it. You don't really ever see the city. And the next movie we're going to get into, and the previous ones, you live in the city. You don't hear. These moments like this scene are very rare outside of scenes that are set, and I'll go to the next image here, in the house. Yeah. So again, this is the first act of the film. This is Haley Joel Osment's character, the android, knowingly being adopted or purchased by the family, whose son is in a coma.
Monica and Henry, yeah.
Monica and Henry. And I love this scene because it creates this little halo.
Well, not just in a coma, but like in a coma, and the scene, it opens with the doctor basically telling Henry, the dad,
he won't.
You need to move on.
Yeah.
It's not
Actually, isn't he an induced coma because he can't be operated on or something like that?
Okay. So he says, I think the line is something, medicine has gone as far as it can go type thing. Yeah. And you see immediately a bond between Monica, the mom, and I forget the son's name. It starts with an M. But you see a Martin, I think, and you see a bond between them, and because she's reading to him through a glass containment chamber. Yeah. And it immediately sets up what becomes the defining relationship of the movie, which is mother and son. Yeah. And, the reason Henry comes about is because, or not Henry, David comes about is because Henry, the dad, wants to help his wife by moving on and getting essentially a substitute son.
Yeah, so they can live their life together.
Exactly.
And what's interesting about that, I love about this character, so in this act, it's about David learning what he is and who he is and how he is. He has some issues where he tries to eat, and I think it causes a malfunction. He's grappling with his own humanity. Yeah. And what's extra special about this movie and concept is that he's a child. Yeah. He's an AI child. And he has childlike.
That's never happened before, yeah.
It's a very different programming, even though he's evolved past that, but he is a forever child. So he can have this wisdom, but he has a childlike nature 100%. To him and everything. He's a scared little boy.
It's way easier to accept an adult as not growing up, right, than as a child who the difference from one year to the next is very noticeable. Yeah, yeah. And yet he is, like you said, he is a forever child.
Yeah. And there are other movies around this time period that grapple with that idea. The Bicentennial Man, Robin Williams. among others.
I love that.
That movie. But interesting again, the sets here architecturally. This is very West Elm. This is very of the time period of early 2000s, late 90s. Things are definitely influenced by mid-century and late modern architecture and furniture. It's a forward-thinking home, but it's not too forward-thinking. It's a little bit trapped in time, and little things like technology, like lights and
there's some throwback elements to it for sure.
It's got a little bit of retro to it.
Yeah.
But it is overall, it's almost timeless in a bad way. Time trapped in it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that. Like it's of no time.
Yeah.
But it's not timeless.
What's interesting is I think one of the things that I read, who knows if it's true, but one of the reasons why Stanley Kubrick wanted Steven Spielberg to potentially direct this movie was because he felt like he was better suited to handle the emotional sides of the story. Yeah. And the emotions, it's not a direct relationship, but you can kind of feel the emotions based in not only the great acting, but also the sets that are there. They reflect the emotions.
They do.
And I feel like, again, this is complete hearsay, but maybe it was more important that the sets reflected the emotions of the scenes they were set in than they reflected a certain style. It all has a common look to it. It has a common period. It's not disjointed, but even in the forest, when the fake moon comes up and they're the robot catchers for the flesh fair, and you get this idea of just like, it's almost like a horror movie set up at a certain point, and you get this fear, and there's a lot of contrast and shadows.
Yeah.
And you get into the home, which is very warm and loving when David's building that relationship with Monica, and then just all these different sets are very reflective of the emotion that's there.
Well, it's interesting too how the humanity of either humans or AI or whatever, it also is reflected and responsive to the built environment.
Yeah.
I mean, very much so. David, scared little boy in the woods, or he's safe in his home. He also, as AI, is no different than us in that he responds to that built environment. And I think it's interesting how there's also this correlation in those human emotions about what is real, or what do we feel, and how do we respond. Like, I'll think of like Rutger Hauer in the end of Blade Runner, when they're on top of the roof of this Bradbury building, raining, and he's outside, and he knows that. So one of the things about those Nexus 6 replicants we talked about in Blade Runner is they have a limited time life.
Right.
So they have like 4 years to live or something like that. It's just programmed into them.
Right.
And their desire to extend life and live beyond. He knows he's dying, and he has this moment where
there's a
doves
clock
are released, and he says something like, I've seen things in other worlds that you will never see, and he's saying it not in a way of like bragging, but he's overwhelmed by life.
Yeah.
And he is in rainy L.A., but he's being part of the humanity he's supposed to have come from when he may have been on Mars and other planets and places like that. To him, it's amazing to be here and to be in this rain and be with this dove or whatever, it's a pigeon, whatever. It's supposed to be a dove, but. And that's just interesting kind of layering to that, I think, too, about how they respond. But he's not scared to be up there. Like Harrison Ford's character is on the ledge of a roof, worried for his life. But in this case, the duality of his invincibility, the Nexus 6 isn't worried about it. I don't know. It's interesting to see how they put these different AI types in different situations to see how their humanity responds to the environment they're in.
Yeah. Well, and then can we transition to her?
Let's do it.
In the first 3 movies, the AI, I think it's funny, it almost has a broader, I wouldn't say broader range of emotions, but in the first 3 movies, all of the AIs have a violent side to them at some point. Even David at the end of AI, when he essentially kills himself with the other one that's sitting in the chair, even though you don't necessarily think of him as a violent character. A big shift on that is her. I think the most violent thing that happens in that movie is when Joaquin Phoenix, accidentally trips while he's trying to run back to the house because he thinks he's lost the voice of Samantha.
Yeah, it's an interesting evolution. Another point I want to make too, just as a side note, is that so her, which we're going to go into here, her, set in our current day or next year, and filmed in 2013 or released in 2013. Is contemporary to more Ridley Scott films. So Ridley Scott went back. I mentioned early on Alien, which was the predecessor to Blade Runner. he made sequels or prequels to that movie as well. He made Prometheus and Covenant.
Yeah.
And both of those movies have a character also named David, who is an AI, and again has his evil wits about him. I mean, he brings out that inner Hal of cross programming. So the reason I bring that up is to say, even in the contemporary of our last movie, people are still talking about the evil side of AI.
Yeah.
Something that's really hot now. Again, as a topic in the last few years, is OpenAI and other AI sources have come online. But at the same time, we get a movie that's very refreshing, a comedy drama, Her. Spike Jonze, 2013. Here we are talking about Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix. Scarlett Johansson is the voice, and Amy Adams, I think, is the...
Scarlett Johansson was the final voice.
Final voice.
Samantha Morton was actually the first voice, and
really?
they re-recorded her.
Did not know
Yeah, they recorded the whole movie with her.
And you followed the thing, I'm sure, was it last year or 2 years ago?
Where they had ChatGPT had a voice that was eerily similar to Scarlett Johansson's.
Yeah. But Scarlett Johansson, as we know, is no stranger to fighting Hollywood or Disney, and for her own equal share of
successful in that one too.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I think again that idea that you really pointed out to me, the idea that there's red in every single shot in this movie, but this is in all the other three movies we're talking about, and in a lot of the movies, AI takes on a physical humanity, and Spike Jonze makes the decision to go very counter to that because there is never a time when Samantha takes on a humanity, and in fact, the one time that he even comes close to that, where he has the proxy, the surrogate. It just is, it all falls apart and it's awkward. And I think it was incredibly well done because it encompasses the awkwardness of what that situation must have been like. But I would argue that even with the lack of a body and a physical presence, this one has maybe one of the deepest and most human relationships.
Nuanced humanity.
Yes.
This one doesn't deal with the existential threat of AI quite the same way. You could almost argue this one's almost darker, hidden behind the lines of...
Particularly the way it ends.
I don't know, the appropriate term is incel community, or people that feel disconnected in the world we live in today from being online. And you have a very... So Spike Jonze, when he made this movie, he had been married until 2003 to Sofia Coppola.
Yeah.
Coppola. And they had gotten divorced. And this was autobiography to their relationship and how it kind of fell apart. Now, the difference is Spike Jonze didn't have his Samantha to interact with. But it's an interesting kind of turn of events because, again, this is set in 2025.
Yeah.
And filmed in 2013. And we go back to Blade Runner, set 6 years earlier than this, in this horrible dark world. And
completely different.
Here we have Shanghai as a backdrop for Los Angeles.
I was going to say this kind of has a wonderful Scandinavian Japanese architecture feel, and it's again very modern. I no pun intended, particularly if you've seen the movie, but this felt almost like a Spike Jonze love letter to AI. The way that he did it, and not at all. There's nothing complicated or high tech about the AI, which is again a differentiating factor for this movie.
Even the loading of the software. When he first installs Sam, and it's just like she comes online. Hello.
Let's start to get to know each other, and that's it.
Boom.
It's off and running.
Like learning everything right then on the fly, and it's like shows you in a scary way, but it does it in this very irresponsible, almost unexpected, just natural, and it shows that tipping point where how easy seductive that AI could be for us to use and to let it supplant human relationships and emotions from computers too.
He strips away so many things. Like this movie is not anti-tech. It's even high tech, but that's not front of mind when you're going through this.
This is first person.
Very
first person.
You don't get caught up in the technology behind it. The architecture, while somewhat futuristic, is not over the top or does not take away from it. It is very much focused on the relationship. Even his job is about human emotions, literally, and writing
cars, writing letters, right? So also the set design team, a little atypical for film, actually was an architecture firm, a very famous, well-known one, Diller Scofidio Renfro, who did DSR, who did all the sets for this, and they've done a lot of beautiful sets beyond or other installations, not just strictly architecture.
Mm-hmm.
They worked recently. One that's still traveling and came through Dallas not that long ago was the Cartier, the jewelry
Yeah.
that had a beautiful traveling exhibit that was in the DMA, and it involves AR and video and interactive lighting, and as well as all of the writings, drawings, and actual jewelry that is the history of Cartier. And so it's a fantastic immersive exhibit, and they are really skilled as a design firm at doing that. And here you can see all that red that's hidden in here.
Yeah.
If you don't mention the red, you almost don't see it. It's almost like it's just a color. It's not overwhelming, but it's there in everything.
I honestly, until you had said something, it just kind of I noticed it, but I was like, oh, it's not as prolific as James was saying. And then I went back and I was like, oh my gosh, it's literally every single scene. And
Yeah.
but it again, I love this is it's at its heart, it's a simple story. It's a simple. It's not simple doesn't mean it isn't complicated or complex. It just is very straightforward. It doesn't get caught up in other things. It's very relational.
It's not Stanley Kubrick trying to talk about the evolution of man and the relationship to the universe and everything else. But it does get into basically it's a love story.
Yeah.
And the ending of another love story, and how that transition period through and beyond, and how he succeeds, but with the idea that one of these two humans is actually a silicone-based human.
So I think
What's it mean to be human?
Well, I think an interesting part of that is the idea of evolution in all of the films. So it's very kind of front of mind in 2001. You start with apes and how they evolve once the monolith gives them the tools. And then you move to Blade Runner and the evolution of the idea of AI and, what's the word? Replicants being human.
Yeah.
And then the evolution of the world has become this dystopian place in AI where the Manhattan's flooded but there's still this evolution of it's really the evolution of AI, because you have all these other models, but then David represents something that is new, and you see that in the last scene where they have David and I think it's Darlene, and they have them in their boxes and they're ready to be shipped to the world.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of the movie you have the humanity has been gone for 2,000 years.
Yeah, it's way in the future. Yeah.
And then even in her, you have this idea of evolution, because by the end, she and all the other OSs are going somewhere. She can't describe where, but she tells Joaquin Phoenix's character, I'll be waiting there for you if you can get there.
Yeah.
So that's this idea of an evolution to another place.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea, though, the disembodiment of it. If you go back and you, in 2001, Space Odyssey, at the very, very end scene, which we didn't talk about, after he's in this purgatory in the White Room, he becomes the Star Child. And there's this brief motif of showing basically an embryo against the moon or against Earth in space, and the idea that he has moved beyond his human body.
Yeah.
And that's what the monolith represents. And if you go further into the Arthur C. Clarke series, like in 2010, Dave Bowen's character actually travels back to Earth in a brief scene to see his mother, but as a burst of energy. Because in this future, body is gone. It's just this energy. And I think, you bring up the far future in AI, artificial intelligence, the creatures, the aliens, whatever, the higher life forms, they're just energy. They take on this body-like form, but they're really just energy. And talk about her, she is simply programming.
Yeah.
She's
ethereal.
Very much so. And we see that in a lot of those movies. And it makes you wonder, kind of question that, versus like Blade Runner, where there's a replicant is about the body, or think of like James Cameron's Terminator series.
Yeah.
And the idea of creating also a replicant. That came out in 1984, 2 years after Blade Runner, and it's also this idea of creating a realistic human in order to infiltrate humans, right?
And when you were talking about her, the idea that there is this kind of ethereal spirit feel to it, but in the very last scene of the movie, he's sitting on the roof with Amy Adams' character, and they make this human connection that's very physical, right? It's something that's very tangible.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I liked about the decisions that Spike Jonze made about this is that even though it's a more modern and believable world, it's not immaculate. Like even the cables in the corner, the pictures, there's always pictures that are like just waiting to be hung up or just had been unpacked that are kind of stacked.
Love
And
that.
it reflects a lot of Joaquin Phoenix's character,
Mm-hmm.
but it's, you know, you've got a carpet rolled up in the back and you've got papers stacked in the windowsill. And obviously because of the kind of director he is, it's all very intentional, right? But even his office and everything has a lived-in quality. It has a realism to it in a way that I don't know how he could have thought about that, you know, whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it makes that film so believable for today because it's not dirty and dystopian, but it's lived in.
Yeah. You know, Spike Jonze.
Yes.
A lot of credit to him that, right? His is the guy who made music videos, right? I think he made REM's Everybody Hurts.
Yep.
Great video about people, about perspectives of people waiting in traffic in Southern California, I believe, and just what's in their mind. What are they going? Everybody hurts, and he always has that humanity side, which makes sense. He'd end up getting to a movie like this. But I think back also as well to, gosh, it may have been 97 or 8. I'm going to get the year wrong on that. But when his first breakthrough film being John Malkovich,
Right.
And architecture plays a big role in that,
even
to the point of being on the 13th and a half floor,
Yeah.
whatever floor
Whatever
it is.
that floor is, it's so
low overhead, and they're in this low half floor in the building in that movie where he ends up finding the doorway that allows him to enter the persona, the mind of John Malkovich.
Yeah.
But again, it's about people. It's technology blended with people
Yeah.
and how he looks at architecture. So
And to your point, humanity. There's that humanity.
Humanity. And I think architecture is a reflection of our humanity. It's a moment in time of our humanity. But there is truth and story both in architecture, just like in any other art. It's what do we aspire to be, or what do we want it to be? How do we want to influence people? And how do we, again, back to how do we want to influence even technology and the way it impacts, the way we talked about how it impacts Haley Joel Osment's character David, versus in this movie how Samantha yearns to be real. She talks about, I wish I could
have a body.
Hold your hand and just walk with you.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. That whole the complete big picture of what it is to be human and what is capable by a lot, what do you call it? By AI, by just intelligence.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me.
And the relationship between our humanity and intelligence. So what about the architectural trends and how they kind of reflected the societal values?
Yeah, I love that. So this last image we've got here from her, what I like about this is that all the furniture looks pretty contemporary, right? But this is all furniture from the 40s and 50s. I mean, or at least evolved from those. Nothing here was an original idea. Some of this takes back to the 20s.
Yeah.
This is all modern furniture. And modern, you got to remember, as a style architecturally and as a movement through all the arts, is not new.
Yeah.
We're 100, you could argue 150 years almost into modern. And where do we go from there?
Yeah.
As architects, we talk about this a lot of like, what is the some of the most senior leadership at this firm grew up at a time when postmodernism as an architectural movement was at its peak.
Yeah.
I mean, coming on the death of modernism in the late 60s. And, or some people coin as the death of modernism. And we moved from postmodernism into deconstructivist architecture, which still lingers with us today. A lot of what we do every day in architecture and our peers do is really postmodern or deconstructive, which is a form of postmodern architecture to some degree. Truly modern architecture is blended in that as well, but it's modernist versus modern. We could go into the real depths of architectural styles. But my point is that in a lot of ways, we don't have a lot of new ideas. And if you think of how long some of the movements in design and the arts lasted, Gothic period of architecture, these are century-long periods of time. So the fact that we're in one now that I think sometimes we think about futurism.
Yeah.
Oh, we have this curved, slick building. Well, futuristic architecture, go back to the Jetsons. I mean,
yeah.
It's not new. These are not new. We have not really pushed the envelope. So it's interesting to see in a movie where we're trying to keep it real and as far as the believability of a future from just a few years from now, which is completely believable. There's nothing in that picture and this or any of the 3 images we looked at that doesn't tell me that could be next year.
I'm curious because I think
or 10 years ago.
The only thing that is consistent, along with what you're saying, in all 4 films, though less so in Her, is that the architecture does not represent the contemporary architecture in which the film is made, meaning that is always something else.
Yeah.
And it's almost that idea of there's not a consistent move from one type of architecture to another. The only consistency is change.
Yeah, exactly.
It will change.
Technology too.
And technology as well.
Architecture moves at such a slower pace. The time it takes and the resources to envision, program, design, fundraise, construct, open, and operate a building can be a very long period of time.
Yeah.
And so the movement of architecture in relation to other arts and other parts of our technology and our environment happens at a much slower pace. So it's interesting is that, especially for an untrained eye, but definitely for trained eyes as well, you look at a building, and if you don't know the building, sometimes it can be hard to place within a decade. You say, oh, it's a 70s building or something like that, but it may have actually been like a 90s building. By the time someone got around to test the idea that someone else had been on the forefront of architecture to do in a higher profile project, and by that works its way down into an everyday building, I'll call it, which there's nothing everyday about any building.
Yeah.
It just, that takes time. Matriculating those ideas down doesn't happen overnight.
Well, and you're never working like with a clean canvas, because you may be doing a 2020s building, but it could be next to a 1970s building, and so the canvas is always going to be colored by the context around it. Whereas with technology, I was watching an article or a video on how people are taking the original iPods and retrofitting them with stuff. But with technology, it moves so fast that canvas kind of gets cleaned every 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
Nobody's walking around with an iPod the way it was. It's the new technology kind of replaces the previous one, and the buildings, you've got this, I think in some ways a really beautiful montage of styles.
Oh,
You've never
fabric.
The
fabric of a city.
I guess the one exception to that might be something like where they're doing a Neom or something where it's completely like it was completely ground up greenfield build or sand.
But even that, I said, architecture is always borrowing. I mean, most art is, but architecture especially has to borrow, and also it's held to a different set of rules of engineering.
Yeah.
Take fashion literature versus like everyday clothing off the shelf, and what the process it takes to get from one to the other, and the speed at which that moves. Now, nostalgia plays in all this too. We have nostalgia for a lot of things. We have nostalgia for some technology. You'll see these re-envisioned Ataris or Nintendos that are basically repackaged to look like an old Nintendo, but it's using newer technology to play older technology games. But that's a very small subset of technology. Most technology, you're right, it's like, where's the new, flashiest iPhone? I mean, you can date a movie often if it's not focused on the technology by what technology is present. Yeah. That could be cars. You see older model cars. You could see older computers. You see some big gray box with a CRT monitor. It's probably a movie from the 80s or 90s, not a movie from the 2000s where I got a flat screen. And that's one way to showcase technology as being futuristic, is to like 2001 Space Odyssey did, was to project onto a flat screen that didn't even exist yet. The whole concept of that. We've referenced several other movies throughout this process, and there are so many more we didn't even touch on. Yeah. If you are watching this episode of TheSquare, love for comments about other movies to consider and talk about. It's definitely an ongoing conversation, and I think as we see more and more how we grapple with AI in our profession to make buildings here at Corgan and to make spaces, how much can we use that tool for good and to better as an extension of our own humanity? One of the things that keeps coming up in this conversation is that idea of the relationship between humanity and our chosen theme of AI and architecture. So how do you see AI changing the relationship as an architect when you do designs with humanity? How does it allow you to better or maybe not reflect humanity as much? How does that relationship change now that we have AI? And that is the big $64,000 question. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I think that it's so early in the process. It's such a tool that has so much power, and it's so unwieldy that a lot of how we've used it thus far has been gimmicky. And I think a lot of new technology comes online. That's often how we are immersed in an experience, that it starts off as some kind of gaming or entertainment thing, even though the potential for more is behind it. It's either that or it starts with war.
Yeah.
The military-industrial complex. In all seriousness, we get a lot of our technology from that. And think about how the military uses AI and how that works into building construction. So it comes from both directions like that before it works its way into like the private sector.
Well, and certainly the iterative side of it allows you to maybe experiment with more designs quicker. I get that aspect of it. But I ultimately, there has to be, it's going to have an effect on an architect's ability to reflect humanity. Again, you said that multiple times, how the sets and the styles reflected the humanity or the emotions of the story. And you're an architect who thinks about the people that are in a design as you're designing it. So AI is going to have that effect. I'm curious to see what that effect ends up being.
I mean, it's interesting. I think that, really good architecture, great architecture, not only fulfills its programmatic goals, but it transcends it to create something that emotionally moves us. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the program is as simple as that. We're trying to emotionally move people, but generally that's a secondary effect. If you make architecture so good that people have an experience when they're there, and generally positive, but sometimes positive, maybe it's more nuanced than that. Sometimes it's about having a solemn experience, depending on if you're in a memorial or museum, depending on what you need for that environment. But I think that one big aspect of AI is the ability to harness, collect, process data. And the more AI can be programmed to filter data or just to do it on its own, if we get to that point, then the faster we can collectively share that data and share the salient points of that data so that we can use it to implement better design. And I think that's part of the trick of this is getting the right data and being able, because I think to back up, one of the ways you can see when architecture is not great is when it doesn't fulfill its program. Yeah. Because ultimately it doesn't deliver on an understanding of what its users need. And that can be because either the architect didn't get it, or because the budget didn't allow, or someone made cuts in the design or in the construction process, or something just beyond went awry. To stop it to arrest that ability to fulfill the concept of the program. And if AI can help us to better demonstrate to the decision-making body that will create and develop and build architecture, then you can get people on board earlier, get that alignment, get the consensus, and have a better odds of delivering better architecture faster.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. Obviously, we're just scratching the surface, but that's why we have multiple episodes of this, so we're good.
I know. Also, on that note, I made a plug earlier for other movies that were AI related, perhaps that we've passed over, but also just other topics. We're always still looking for more great topics.
Absolutely. So if you have an idea or a topic or a strong opinion, you have an HSO, Hot Sports Opinion, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. We are definitely looking at them, and that can potentially inspire future episodes. Yeah. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to have a little bit of scotch next time.
Sounds good.
When it's not 9 o'clock in the morning.
Who says it's 9 o'clock in the morning? The magic of...
Thank you for watching as well, and make sure to check out the next episode.